family. It's always been so important to me ever since I was very small. I just enjoyed that, and just the responsibility of making sure your family is healthy with the right foods and having good dinners and making sure you have the things they need, their clothes, their keeping things as nice as you can is always been important to me. And then the caring part of being a good character of a godly woman is the community, helping in the community. I've done a lot of food pantries in different churches, and it just gives you such a fulfillment to do these things for our community, because you want to keep up what's going on in your home, but you want to share that love and concern for other people. And then another characteristic was being fair, just being fair to people, your children especially, because they know when you're not fair as you're raising them. They know. So just fairness, and then being a good citizen. To me, being a good citizen, the respect for others, the authority, how I speak to people, just the kindness, and trying to understand where people are coming from and not taking it so literally, or not taking it so deep if someone says something to you in the wrong tone, and forgiving them. So I just believe all these characteristics is what has made me the person I am. Of course, there's lots of things that I could definitely work on. There's lots of things that I wish I could do better. But when I'm focused, when I know that each day my value is in what God sees in me, it just it makes everything seem better. So,
Donna, as I listen to you and I hear the experiences that have really helped you to grow, and being able to pursue God and what He really wants to develop in you. It's such an encouragement, and I hope that perhaps women that may be listening to us today can appreciate far more that there's someone speaking not to them, but for them. Mm-hmm. And in what you have said is such an encouragement, because how many women actually do these things that you've described, and as mothers perhaps, and it is so unnoticed. In fact, in many households, it is literally taken for granted. I think about it in relation to another godly woman, and I've known this family for many, many years, and her husband had an executive position, but most people would not have realized how much his particular wife was a integral part of his success. And one of the things, and I was so impressed, it was not that she was doing this because she wanted others to follow her particular example, but she did it out of her heart. And what she did, she had her husband, who, as I said, was an executive. She had her children, and she had a care for the needy and the poor in such a way, just as you described, working in a food pantry or a clothing ministry, and to help the poor. What she would do is she would go to some of the better neighborhood thrift stores, and she would outfit her family, her husband, her children, and herself in the clothes that had actually been placed in the thrift stores where she could purchase them for a fraction of what they would have been in a brand new position from one of the main retailers or whatever. But she would do this, and her purpose was not so that her family looked like they had hand-me-down, because nobody ever knew it. I mean, some of the things that she was able to select, God just endowed her with the ability to find very fine clothing at a fraction of the cost. But the importance was that the money that she saved by doing that, she made sure that she gave it up to the Lord. She provided it to him so that he could place it in the hands and in the homes of others that had such need. And I watched her do this for years. I mean, I've known them for, I would say, close to 30 years. And they have never gone without, but they have always reached out to the poor. Now, in her husband's case, it was done through an executive capacity, but in her case, it went very much unnoticed, and except many of the people knew what she did. And one of the parts of Proverbs 31 is what you just spoke about when you were talking about reaching out to the poor. But it says in the portion of Proverbs 31 and verse 20, she opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. I think that that's beyond just taking care of your own household. Mm-hmm. That's very good management in a household so that there is more to bless others, and without any selfishness, in many cases, providing for others rather than even providing for yourself. And Donna, I appreciate what you said, the description of how you can organize a household. And in many cases, the one thing that is so impressive to me, and I know that I can speak to other men that may be listening, they talk about women being able to do something referred to as multitasking. And I've watched so many times my own wife, how she can do 4 or 5 things at one time, make them all come out almost in the same time frame, as I'm sure you can do as well in many ways in the home. Men don't have that same quality. Now, I'm not saying that we can't do things, but I don't think we can concentrate our focus in so many areas. We can be more focused perhaps in one area and accomplish that, maybe in 2. But multitasking for men is a very difficult task. It's a very difficult thing. So I'm so pleased that God gave us women so they could complete that portion of our need in life. Because if it was left up to us, there'd be so many things that would be left undone. Men are essentially tasked with 3 basic functions in a family. One is they are to be the provider. Now, that doesn't mean they're the only provider, but they are to be a provider. Secondly, they are to be the protector of the family. I think that a family rests in security when they realize that there's a husband, a father that is there to protect them, or that his influence is there to protect them. And then thirdly, and perhaps even more importantly, he's to be a proclaimer. He's to be the one that proclaims God's word over his family. He's the one to pronounce the blessing over his family, which begins with his wife. I think more husbands need to bless their wives so that the Lord can bring out the beauty of the wife. You know, the longer that I'm married and the longer that I can see women as we age, what I find is the inner beauty begins to radiate far more so than the outer beauty. And for me, it just epitomizes what God is saying in Proverbs 31 as he describes the virtue of a godly woman. So again, I have brought out something from perhaps a experiential position where I've known women who unselfishly have watched the Lord develop in them the same things that you've described in many ways, the character building that is being done internally, inside, as he begins to radiate through you. And I appreciate so much your willingness to allow others to come to know that, because I think it's such a vital need. In today's society, I really believe that it is not a gender position, it is a godly position. And I don't think men can fulfill that role, not totally. And I don't believe that God meant for men to fulfill that role. That's the reason that he created women. And I so appreciate God's wisdom in that. Also, Donna, I can say one other thing in regards to what you have mentioned, and that is when you talked about being trustworthy and fair, you said you need to be fair to your children. I think children learn who they can depend on through a godly mother. A mother that actually builds a condition of trust and realizing, even in discipline, that there's fairness in what she is doing, especially when children don't understand. And when they look at an example, they need to understand at some point. Young women need to understand the responsibility that they have. Fairness is something that you began to talk about. I'd like to hear you expand a little more on how you demonstrate fairness in a situation even with grown children. And that happens as we age and develop families.
Well, it is a kind of a tricky thing because I mean I was thinking mostly of when my children were little, not just raising them, but raising other people's children and babysitting other people's children. The fairness was always, if I'm dealing with the situation and it's maybe not my child, or if I was a kindergarten assistant for years, how would I treat this child in what they're asking for or whatever the situation is if it wasn't my child? Would I be teaching them the same thing? Would I be disciplining them the same way? And I've had to ask myself that many times, raising stepchildren. And, that was kind of the direction I was thinking of when I wrote fairness. Just thinking about being fair so that if one child saw another situation, would they have felt they were treated the same way? Or were they treated differently because they weren't your natural born child? Situations like that. I didn't really think about it too deeply when I was